Where were you the day that the verdict was read? Do you
I
remember?
think I was in school, and I think everyone turned off the, stopped class and turned on the TV and just watched.
It was such a cultural moment, and we have veteran journalist David Goldstein, who actually covered the infamous double murder trial of OJ Simpson. Thank you so much for being with us.
Sure.
Can you take us back, having covered this, as to the 1990s here in Los Angeles? This ended up being a moment where I think it revealed there are two Americans when that verdict was read. One cried, one cheered. Take us through.
Yeah, it really was a slice of life for what was going on in Los Angeles at that time. Big distrust between blacks and whites in the city, and this trial sort of brought it all to a head. People were, your friends would, you would lose friends, win friends over this, what people thought about his guilt or innocence, and it was an amazing time in the city, because while it was this one trial, it really showed the problems not only in Los Angeles, but in cities all across the country, the distrust of people in the criminal justice system. So people were just riveted, and obviously because OJ Simpson was, prior to that, famous for being an athlete, a spokesperson, an actor, and just somebody who a lot of people admired.
Yeah, it was about race, justice. It was also about wealth, right?
Mm-hmm.
About whether if he had all this money and the stature and power and celebrity, would he have been found, been exonerated. It was also a time that really created this huge media circus. I think 95 million people watched the infamous slow-speed Bronco chase.
Yeah, no, everybody was watching that. Everyone was watching the trial. At KCAL, we covered it live, gavel to gavel, and I was down there at the courthouse every morning at 8:30. I was sort of moderating that whole trial, and people were watching. I mean, I would leave and go home or go to a store. Everybody was asking, what's going on? What did you see in the courtroom? What didn't we see in the courtroom? So many people were watching this, and you just showed Ron and Nicole, and the tragedy here is that two families lost loved ones here. They had to live through this whole circus of a trial, and obviously to this day they're still living with it, and that's the tragedy that sometimes people gloss over in this case.
Well, and that's, if people are just joining us, we should go over a little bit of the timeline. You think about OJ Simpson, 1985, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. He was this famous football player, charismatic, good-looking, acted in about 20 different movies and films. He was a pitchman. You remember the Hertz car commercial? I don't think people ever forget of him racing through. And then in 1994, tried for the murder of his ex-wife and her friend, Ronald Goldstein. And what's interesting here, 1995, he's acquitted. And then you flash forward to 2007, where he then is arrested and goes on trial for attempted kidnapping, robbery, this plot, because he's fallen from such grace, trying to still lead the lifestyle he once had, trying to get money pumped into his life. He ends up then going to prison for 9 years. It's remarkable culturally. Can you just talk about the impacts you've seen in Los Angeles as someone who, not only covered the trial, but then through all of the developments later on in his life?
Well, I think it had a profound effect on the criminal justice system in Los Angeles. The trial, a media trial, cameras in the courtroom. There's no cameras in the courtroom today. There were back then, and the reason the cameras aren't there today is mainly because of what happened during the Simpson trial, and judges and attorneys didn't like the fact that every little thing they said was pieced apart on the news that night over and over and over again. So that changed in the criminal justice system. I think the whole issue of money and somebody who had so much money could, if you want to say this, walk away and win a case that perhaps people thought he was guilty, and it brought home the fact that money could do this. They called it the dream team at that time. He had the biggest attorneys in town, and over and over and over, and he kept bringing another one and another one and another expert, going up against an underfunded DA's office. Nobody could go up against that kind of money and those kind of experts, and you basically had two deputy DAs going up against the Dream Team. And that certainly had a lot to do, I think, with what the final verdict was. It just changed Los Angeles. It brought to forefront the issue of blacks and whites in Los Angeles, and how, as you mentioned, how people viewed this trial differently. Some people cheered when the verdict came down, others cursed it. So, it brought home the differences in this town at the time.
And it was just almost made for TV. Some people say it was kind of the beginning of reality television, because people were hanging on every word that happened in the courtroom, and this tapestry of characters involved. Like you said, the Dream Team, you had OJ, you had these deputy DAs, one of whom's now running to be a judge. I mean, you had such characters involved, and it kept going. There were always these new developments and new evolutions, these stories.
There was always something that left on a cliffhanger on a Friday afternoon. There would be some issue that they bring up in court, and we'll settle that on Monday, and that would be the big issue that people were talking about all weekend. It really, people were really watching every move in this trial. It was the first time that DNA was really used openly in a trial, and I remember the DA's office, and they were criticized for it. They spent about a week explaining the minutia of DNA and how scientists can figure out whose DNA is what, which I don't think they would do today, because it's more or less understood today. The DNA matches you as the suspect, and pretty much people accept it. But back then, it was something brand new. And so there were so many riveting parts to this case. I'll tell you on a personal note, I mean, you guys have seen me, and the viewers have seen me over the last 20 years, and how I, question people and go after the people that we exposed in our investigations. But I look back on the time that I was outside Parker Center, the old police headquarters, when OJ Simpson came back from Chicago. He was being questioned by police. He was still, the man who everybody admired. And he comes out of the police station, and my question to him was, OJ, are you a suspect? And his attorney says, David, we're not going to answer those questions. And I pretty much didn't answer and didn't ask another question. I would have looked at it and done that differently today, but that's just who O.J. Simpson was. And you looked at it, and he was this idol to millions of people.
You've spoken on it a little bit, but I want to go back. The racial tensions that this trial did end up bringing up in this country, I would argue, are still prominent today. You look at what happened in 2020 with the death of George Floyd and the mistrust of police and a white officer and a black man who's killed. And, I think it still permeates to this day. I mean, we've never really gotten over some of these issues that stem directly from this trial.
No, I don't think we have. And I think it's still when an African American is on trial, there's still questions that are being brought up in parts of the community on whether he or she could get a fair trial, and looking at the composition of the jury and things like that were certainly at the forefront back in the early 90s in this case. So I don't think much of that has changed. I'm not sure it ever will change. A lot of people question on whether the O.J. Simpson case was really the case you were going to dissect as far as Black America and white America. So I think that question's always going to be there.
And there was, of course, the question, the reason he was found not guilty, the jurors said, was because they thought that the white police officer planted evidence. And then, of course, the famous line. I mean, what was your reaction actually being there when you heard the line about the glove?
That was a Friday afternoon, because they always came through with these little cliffhangers on Friday afternoon, and I was watching it, and they put the glove on, and the glove apparently, by looks at it, didn't fit. And I remember repeating those words from Johnny Cochran when we went to the break after that. And I think one of the producers in my ear reminded me that, hey, we don't know if it didn't fit. It appeared it didn't. That's up to the jury to decide. But you just get so involved with it as a reporter, and this moment of putting the glove on and the camera right above it, looking down at it, and there's the picture there. It was an amazing time. And again, If I'm correct, it was a Friday afternoon, right at about 2:55. They quit at 3 o'clock, and that was the moment that everybody thought of all weekend long until wondering what they were going to do Monday morning.
Wow.
And the only time we heard OJ speak throughout that entire trial, right?
Yes, yes, he didn't. He didn't testify in that trial, so yeah, that was about the only time.
Wow, we could dive into so much, the connections to the Kardashians, just what this has done to pop culture, the chases we now cover, and how we do that. There's so much, but David,
Exactly.
we're going to let you go.
Please.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great having you reminisce, even remembering
Coming out
dates.
of retirement for us, David. Thank you.
For you guys, anytime.
Appreciate it.